Hello, welcome to Thursdays on the Stoop. I'm Julian Schendelman, and this is Outspoken, reading for an audience with Mary Berman. Mary Berman is a Philadelphia-based author. Her debut novel, Until Death, about the horrors of daughterhood and the wedding industrial complex, is forthcoming from Little Brown. She also has taught fiction workshops at the University of Mississippi, the Metro West Writers Guild, and a writing room. Find her online at mtgberman.com or subscribe to her newsletter at mtgberman.substack.com. And I'll put those links in the chat for you so you don't have to type them out. Mary, take it away.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This is a workshop and a presentation about how to read your work out loud in a way that is dynamic and engaging for your audience. Excuse me while I get a hold of the PowerPoint. There we go. So we're going to start out today with some little introductions. We'll go over some strategies for when you're reading out loud, specifically focused on selecting a piece, the physicality of performing, and then editing your work so that it reads out loud well. We are going to watch some very short clips of some authors who I think are particularly good at reading out loud, and they're all a little bit different. And then we will analyze what they've done, what choices they've made, how they present, and what you guys think of those performances, how that makes you feel. After that, there is some opportunity for practice. That's optional, but would be great. As Julian said, will be paused during that time. There will also be additionally optional opportunity for critique on your performance. We'll have a brief Q&A and then we'll conclude the session today. Any questions before we get started? And can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. Then here we go. I will aim to keep an eye on the chat, but as I will be, moving in a couple of different directions here, please bear with me. Okay. So if anybody would like to share, and if you feel comfortable, since this is a workshop about reading out loud, if you feel comfortable being on camera and sharing with the audience, that would be great. Otherwise, just put it in the chat. What experience do you already have with reading your work out loud? And we'll start with that one. Does anybody care to share? Okay. Oh, looks like we have somebody. Merrick?
Hi, yeah, I'm Merrick, and my experience reading out loud, I've performed on stage before, and I also previously co-hosted a open mic that happened once a month in Pittsburgh called Poetry and Pints that was nominated for a lit thing with City Paper. So that's where I'm coming in from.
That
Still
sounds awesome.
nervous, still excited.
Oh, you should be teaching the workshop. That sounds extremely cool. Um, I see a couple of people also in the chat. Some folks have read their work out loud over the years. Some folks have even read their work out loud quite a bit. So it seems like we have a breadth of experience today here, which is great. Do any of you have any nerves or worries around reading out loud? And what is it that you're nervous about, and what do you hope to get out of today's workshop, if anything in particular? Merit.
Despite all that experience, I come in still with oodles of like layers of anxiety and nerves around public performance and speaking in general. So I'm looking to see any sort of insights I can glean on how to better anchor while I'm, being present in the moment, and other tips and tricks people use to help like support themselves as they're, you know, on stage doing their thing, just to see if there's something that I haven't picked up yet.
Can I ask if you're interested, and the answer can obviously be both, if you're interested in anchoring techniques for before you start or while you're performing?
Both. I do a lot of nervous system work, so I'm always interested in anchoring myself, and I love learning about what other people do to anchor themselves in preparation for any sort of alchemical moment or in that active moment. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And yes, thank you. And in the chat, we have some additional nerves. Picking the right section, which is something we'll definitely talk about today. Worried about the balance between serious and theatrical, which is something we'll also talk about today. Feeling nervous, even though you don't think you'll be nervous, which is very relatable. And folks who just want to brush up before readings that are to come, and concerns about speaking too fast for the audience to catch everything, which also seems to be one that, is common among the group. So we'll touch on a lot of those today. The first thing we are going to talk about is selecting a piece. And selecting a piece is a really big part of this because a lot of the time people will pick their favorite story or their favorite part of a story. And it's important to remember that when you're reading it out loud, it's no longer just the text on the page, and the experience that your audience is getting from it is no longer the experience that you're getting from it when you just read the words on a page. It is now the basis for a performance. It's like a script. So when you're considering a piece, these are some things that can do some of the advanced work to make it something that will seem dynamic, that will be exciting, that the audience is more likely to engage with. And these are all optional, and you don't have to pick a piece with all of these or even any of them. It can be hard to find a piece that has all of these things, but this helps. One is a piece that is very, very short, or a very contained scene from a larger work. So, for example, if you're a person who ever writes flash fiction or flash nonfiction, pieces that are very, very short inherently, off the bat, it can be helpful to pick one of those because the audience will get the whole arc, the whole journey in the couple of minutes that you're talking up there. In general, I find that it helps to anticipate about 150 to 160 words per minute. That doesn't seem like a whole lot. Obviously, if you're reading for, I mean, I'm not doing this math in my head, but like if you did the math, you would be like, that is not a lot of time, and that is not a lot of space per, for if you have like 5 minutes allotted to you, that's just not a lot of time to read anything. And it can be better to lean even on the 150 words per minute side, just because you do want to read a lot slower than you think. In addition, it can be easier to read something that's told in the first person, just because it's like you are talking to the audience, even if it's through a character. And so that can be a lot easier for your audience to connect with. Something that contains humor, that has a lot of jokes that you can also tell humorously, or something that is a very dramatic scene that you can tell in a dramatic fashion, can be easy for the audience to latch onto. And then with dialogue, it's the same thing. It's like you're talking to them because you are actually talking. Your characters are talking. And in a little bit, when we watch some clips, you'll see at least one of the clips is very humorous, and at least one of the clips is very dramatic. Although, of course, humor can sometimes be in the eye of the beholder. I'm just taking a moment to look at the chat. I see there's something in there. Okay, awesome. So once you've selected a piece, you will be practicing performing it. You can see that one of the bullets here, even though it is the last bullet, is practice in advance, and that's a really, really key one. I know it's very basic, but practice with a timer. I like to record myself so that I can play it back and kind of do some post-game analysis. One of the things that I have learned about myself, is that I go, a lot, which I'm doing right now. And the other one is that I do this a lot. And so when I'm reading out loud in front of an audience, it is helpful to have practiced the piece over and over again and recorded it so that I know when I'm going, and I can cut that out, and I no longer have the habit once I'm actually performing the piece. As has been discussed, you want to read a lot slower than you think you should. I find that even more than that, you want to pause a lot more frequently than you think you should. And this is something that also the recording can come in handy with, because when you watch it back, you will notice that like not only are you often reading faster than you expect, but you're also moving straight through it in a way that actually doesn't feel natural and also does not make for such a dramatic performance. And in addition, when you do those pauses, instead of like pausing and then starting to talk again, you want those, like, you want like a dramatic pause, like in between paragraph breaks or in between jokes or whatever. You want them to last an amount of time that when you're up there, it feels really, really, really weird. I like to just count to 5 in my head slow a lot of the time because otherwise it is excruciating. But it will make a big difference when you're doing it. So practice in advance, ideally with a timer, ideally with a recording, watch the recording, and then use that to kind of tweak your performance as you go before you're doing it in real time, slower than you think, pausing more than you think, letting the pauses last a lot longer than you think. Another element of physicality is dynamism and conviction. By dynamism, I really mean movement. And by conviction, I really mean that a lot of the time people dislike or feel uncomfortable with taking up space in front of a room, with having all eyes on you, with the sort of implication that you feel like people should be paying this much attention to you, that this many people should be paying this much attention to you. And a large part of this process is just insisting to yourself and to everybody else that these people should be paying attention to you right now. Just like rooting down into that sense of conviction as hard as you possibly can. Some ways that you can convey this are making eye contact with the audience. I put this in scare quotes because as those of you who have been on a stage or even in front of a room with like 5 people sitting in folding chairs in front of you, you're not making like literal eye contact. Like you're not like actually like looking into people's eyeballs as you go. You are just like raising your face and looking out at their faces and making it look to all of those people like you might be making eye contact with someone in there. So it's sort of like a visual sleight of hand rather than actually like looking at somebody's face in their eyeballs. It helps a lot to add movement. I talk like this anyway, so that's convenient for me. But moving your hands, moving, like doing like sort of dramatic facial expressions if you can. If you're comfortable, and if you have a microphone that allows you to do this, actually leaving the podium or the front and like pacing or walking around, just any physical movement that you can involve is really helpful. If you feel comfortable doing voices, that can be really fun if you have different characters, if you're reading a piece that does have a lot of dialogue where different characters are talking. I don't do accents because that would be embarrassing and upsetting for everybody, but I will pitch my voice like very high up or very high down, or sometimes do a very dramatic South Jersey accent, like if you know, you know. And at the bottom, I say half jokingly, if you can dissociate. But obviously, it's just easier to do this when you're practicing in your own house by yourself or with one friend, but ideally by yourself, than it is when everybody else is there. So insofar as you can just pretend you are by yourself, that can also be a very helpful tool. Taking a moment to look at the chat. Yes, scan the faces, don't target. Exactly. That is exactly what I meant by eye contact, scare quotes. And then finally, it helps to edit your piece down once you've selected it, once you've decided how you're going to read it, in order to make it more organic, sort of as a script, as opposed to, again, a thing that is designed to be read with the eyeballs inside one's own brain. One of the things that can be helpful to do is cut out additional or unnecessary dialogue tags. Those tags might be really helpful on the page, but they are often, when you're reading it out loud, unnecessary, especially if you are acting or vocalizing in a way that makes it clear who's talking. So cutting out like he said, she said can be one way to help the piece flow smoother to your audience and to, again, make it seem like more of a script, more of a performance instead of just a story that it would make more sense if they were just reading by themselves with their eyes. You can add additional paragraph breaks to remind yourself to pause. Again, those frequent lingering pauses. It can help, you've probably seen this one before, to format it double spaced in large font with lots of margin space, just so that you can see the words really easily and move through it really easily. I didn't say this, but if you're using a printed copy, it can help to print it on one side, not two sides, so that you don't have to flip your little booklet over all the time. And you can make notes in the margins if that helps you. I actually find that making notes in the margins is frequently just a distraction for me because then my eyes jump over to whatever I've put in the margins and I kind of lose my place in the actual text. So your mileage may vary with that one, but a lot of people find it helpful to have pronunciation notes, reminders to pause here, reminders to pause for longer than you think. Somebody said in the chat that they write slow at the top as a reminder. So all of these little reminders can be helpful to you. Any questions before we move forward? Just checking the chat. Can you target a friend? I mean, if that makes you more comfortable to do, then I think certainly. I think that scanning, especially if you have an audience that's spread out over a little bit of space, can be better than just targeting one person because it makes the rest of the audience feel engaged and included. But if your options, like if scanning feels like really, really, really inorganic to you, and like the way that you look up and check with the audience is by just like looking at one person who you know, then like, sure, of course. Any other notes for the chat? I'll give it a minute in case anybody's typing. And I am doing that thing where I count in my head. Okay. Some final notes, and this is for the overall presentation, not necessarily just the reading part. Consider the total length of your reading. More than about 5 minutes at a time can often feel long. The longest I have ever read at one time was 20 minutes, and I thought it was like insane. And I once watched somebody very famous read for a full hour, and it was like truly a significant amount of time. Maybe people who are really into audiobooks don't notice this as much as I notice it, but I was like, this is going on a really, really, really long time. So I find 5 minutes to be a strong amount of time, enough to sort of get a scene or a little piece in, maybe 6, 7 minutes, but not so long that people are like, what's going on? If you are comfortable doing this, if you're really comfortable with your piece, consider interjecting asides or notes to the audience. Like if you say something funny and people laugh, you can, give like a winky nod to the audience or reference it in some way. And if reading as part of a longer event, a larger event, like that hour-long thing that I just said, consider breaking up the reading portion and interspersing it with conversation, audience interaction, like a longer form of audience interaction than just the asides, Q&A, other activities. Later on, we're going to watch a clip from an author called Victor Laval. The clip that I'm giving you is not this clip, but I have seen a recording of him reading where he like breaks it into 3 sections, and section 1 was watching 8 minutes of the movie The Thing. So like you can throw other stuff in there if you want to, and it can also help make the event feel more dynamic. Okay, so we are going to watch 3 clips now, 1 minute each. I'm going to ask you guys to take a look at these clips, watch them sort of critically, figure out what's working for you, what's not working for you, what these folks did that we just talked about, and also maybe some things that they did that we didn't talk about, or things that go directly against what we just talked about, just what's working in these readings for you. And similarly, if you are like, why did she pick these readings? These are not interesting or engaging at all. Let me know that and figure out why. Like, why did they feel flat? Why did they feel uninteresting? Just general analysis. So here we go, David Sedaris. And if you guys can't hear anything, let me know in the chat.
Probably like a lot of you, my sister Amy and I were wondering what difference we could make in the election that just took place. And we thought the best thing we could do was get somebody who hadn't voted to vote. But most of the people we know are pretty conscientious. But Amy was working on a TV show, And she met a woman who was 45 and had never voted because she said she didn't want to be tagged for jury duty. Amy got her to register. And then a couple of weeks before the election, Amy said, "Have you thought about who you're going to vote for?" And the woman said, "I read that if Kamala Harris is elected, the first thing she's going to do is cancel Christmas." And Amy said, "Voting's not for everyone." It's actually pretty hard and the lines are long. So I wrote this for that. One more.
Okay. Somebody has already said in the chat, love a broken fourth wall. Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why first person can be really helpful. David Sedaris has the advantage that he is reading personal essays in which he is ostensibly the main character. When I found this reading, it actually took me a minute to realize that he had already started because I thought that he was just introducing the piece. And then as it goes on longer, I realized, oh, this is the piece. But yes, so broken fourth wall, good pauses, absolutely lasting a long time, especially after he makes a joke. Pushing up his glasses, I do that too. I would do that. I do it at night when I have my contacts out. Humor, but yes, about the glasses, some physicality, some engagement. The jokes, David Sedaris, I know can be like a fairly polarizing humorist, but presumably and the people in his audience think he's funny, and he's definitely out here, giving them what they asked for. Sustained eye contact with the audience, really memorizing the text, possibly. We see that Tim O'Brien at least did this. Memorizing the text or becoming very, very familiar with it and talking so casually that you wouldn't know that he was reading something. So there you go, David Sedaris. Also a sort of classically good reader because he has so much experience with radio. Obviously, what you're reading on radio is all voice, and what you're performing in front of people also involves your face and body. But those are some of the classics. David Sedaris is a classic good reader and performer if you're ever looking to practice and looking for clips of people who do this thing really well. Just going to give it another maybe 10 seconds in case anybody has additional notes that they're putting in the chat. Okie dokie. Next, something very different.
Let's see, I guess you just need to know it's, she's walking. It was 2 a.m. I'd left the known world and hadn't died. In fact, I felt fantastic. Was this the secret to everything? This bodily freedom? It felt intuitive and healthy, as if promiscuity was my birthright as a woman. Maybe it was. Was this the skeleton in civilization's closet? The reason why men had come down so hard on us since the start of time? I had the urge to call my mom and tell her the good news, but no, it was too late in every way. The moon, so huge. It suddenly seemed natural and sweet to fuck all my friends, but also my lawyer, who I couldn't remember the face of because we only communicated through email, and everyone else I worked with, regardless as if they were someone's assistant or the head of a company. What better way to understand other people's realities?
There you go. Any thoughts on this one? Separately, I am enjoying the conversation in the chat about Tim O'Brien. We have people noting she's expressive and breathy, that she did a great job varying her tone and her pitch. Excellent use of humor, lots of seeing statements, great use of pauses. I find I find either her delivery of the humor or the audience's reaction to the humor really interesting in this one. Maybe it's just that the microphone is only tuned to Miranda July, but I was like, why did everybody not laugh when she was like, I was suddenly seized by the urge to like fuck all my friends and my lawyer. Like, I was like, why isn't anybody laughing at this? Um, she brings some theatricality. She also set up the piece by saying you need to know she's walking. She has the more classic reader tone, I think, that people think of, except maybe like the best version of it. That's what's really striking to me about this clip, or maybe not so striking. The other two clips that I'm showing you guys, the one we just watched and the one by Victor that we're going to watch next, are very performancy, and Miranda July really does sound like she's reading out loud in a more standard way. Um, I actually, Merrick, also wanted to ask that question. What did you mean by seating statement?
Sorry, my tech all glitched at once.
Oh, it's okay.
S- so she would give these like little lead-ins, like the way that she would introduce that first statement about wanting to fuck all your friends, and like I didn't realize that this was going to be the theme of the poem until like she led in with that, and then like she'd have the next it's kind of like little rabbit holes, and it's hard for me to explain without having her poem in front of me to give you like the exact examples, but that's how it felt to me. It was like she'd have little seeds that she'd drop, and that would like lead into the next funny bump of the joke.
Okay, so a quality of the piece that she has selected, not a quality of the reading necessarily. Is that what you mean?
Um, Possibly both, because the way that she delivers it really emphasizes that like I don't necessarily notice it when people are speaking in like an advertisement and stuff, but if she was advertising her poem, it would come across in like a copywriting context.
Got it. It's
So
interesting
I'm
that
trying
you
to,
No, I was gonna say it's interesting that you say poem too. Um, it's an excerpt from a novel, but I think in the chat there's folks talking about how she does do like a sort of classic reading voice, and I think for some reason that feels associated with poetry, or is at least a way that poetry is often delivered. So that's really interesting that that connection was made there. Um, yeah, cool. Um, there are some folks in the chat who are, thank you, Merrick. There are some folks in the chat who are less interested in this classic reading voice. I confess myself that I have heard from multiple people of Miranda July as a fantastic reader of her own work, that her audiobooks that she does, that she reads by herself, are very, 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 very good. I did expect more, as we just discussed, more done with like the face, more done with the body, more sort of like modulating of tone in a way that feels less rehearsed, even though it is very rehearsed. So I think that this is a really, really prime example if you want to play it kind of straight. But additional modulation can be a way to play it less straight if that's something that is more interesting to you. Before we move on, somebody asked any tips or resources for delivering on Zoom. I would say the most obvious one is to look at the camera where the little light is as often as possible, instead of just reading off of the screen or off of a piece of paper. That's the sort of Zoom version of scanning the audience, and it works really well, actually. And then apart from that, practice, as usual, like practice timing. The good news is that it's easier to record yourself in advance, and do your own post-game analysis because you can record yourself on Zoom, and also move a little bit further away, situate yourself a little further away from the camera so that people can see whatever hand gestures or movement gestures or face gestures that you're bringing to the table. Any final thoughts on Miranda July or on delivering on Zoom before we move on to our final clip. Okie dokie. And just getting hold of my cursor here. All right, here we go. Last one. And this is also an excerpt from a novel.
Someone in the apartment was screaming. Had been screaming for a while now. Was it him? No, he didn't think so. How could he scream underwater? Underwater was how he felt. Sunk, waterlogged, drowned. He couldn't see, felt nothing, but he could hear that goddamn screaming, wailing, and it wouldn't stop. He tried to use his arms, but for some reason they wouldn't move. They'd gone so numb that he couldn't even be sure they were attached to him anymore. There was only this deep chill in his shoulders, an arctic stab in both sockets. This was because his arms were chained behind him. They'd been that way for hours now. He didn't open his mouth for fear of swallowing water. He wasn't in a river, nor the ocean, but that's how he felt, submerged. He was in an apartment in New York City, his apartment, where he'd lived with his family for 2 years, being guided back to clarity, to consciousness, by the lead line of another person's agony. In a way, he had to be grateful for this stranger's pain. If not for that screaming, he'd only flail aimlessly in this darkness, lost. He tried to look down, but when he did, his neck got squeezed so tightly he had to open his mouth to gasp. He was in his own kitchen, chained to one of his chairs. A bike lock, a U-lock, had been looped around his throat. It held him tight to the steam pipe that ran from the kitchen floor into the ceiling. Because winter had lasted so long, the steam pipe was on. When he pulled forward and gasped, the lock resisted and he slumped backward. As soon as he did, the back of his exposed neck touched the steam pipe, like a pork cutlet pressed against a hot skillet. He hissed, the same sound as frying meat.
Okay, thoughts on that one, either out loud or in the chat. Clutching his throat. Good eye contact and gestures, one of which is clutching his throat. And yes, absolutely. He's frequently, at the very least, moving his hand as he looks up and down. I think that this is a really, really excellent example of picking a piece as well, picking a scene from a book that feels, Merrick just said clear, steady, and although urgent, not rushed. I was going to say urgent. It feels really, really, really tense. Like you get a sense of this person like locked to the steam pipe in his own apartment with a bike lock, and his disorientation, the like hideous physicality of what's going on, comes through partly because the reading is very skilled and direct, but also because the choice of excerpt is a really, really urgent and direct excerpt. I will note that I saw Victor Laval not at this event, but read from this excerpt. He did the same reading in a different place, and I saw it. That was probably 2017, and that was the first time that I was like, oh, you can read out loud and have it be really, really engaging. Like you can have it out, you can read out loud and have it be A, a performance, and B, a really, really strong advertisement for the book. I went out and bought this book after this. This really worked for me. So if you are looking, as with the previous ones, if you are looking for examples of people reading fiction out loud to an audience in a way that feels, at least to one person, like it really works, he's a good person to watch videos of. And also, well, that's it. I'll leave it at that. I think those are strong. Any additional notes in the chat or out loud before we move to practice? Maybe you guys want to put some more notes in the chat so that we don't move to practice. Okay. So here we go. Julian, I am going to ask you to pause. Julian gave me a thumbs up. He's already on it. I assume everybody can see the PowerPoint, okay? Cool, thank you. We are approaching the end of the workshop. We've got about 5 or 10 minutes maybe for Q&A. I know that you guys have been asking questions throughout, but do you guys have any additional questions now? Just keeping an eye on the chat. Any pet peeves in a reading style? I would love to open this one up to the group. Any pet peeves in a reading style? A difficulty with people apologizing for or degrading their own work. I agree. Especially, I wouldn't call it a pet peeve, but I think especially in line of what we talked about earlier in terms of conviction, one of the ways that you can undercut your own conviction is by, getting up there and then indicating through something that you shouldn't really be up there reading your own work, because of course you should. Things we already covered, going too fast, looking down the whole time, absolutely. One person said usually they don't like breathiness, but that July's voice worked. I think that July's voice in particular and her reading style is really, really stylized. Like it's breathy or has some vocal fry, but in a way that feels like part of the performance, which is interesting. Good gimmicks versus annoying gimmicks. Well, when you're George Saunders, it's not a stunt anymore. Then it's just you being George Saunders. Sure. Helpful to include warnings if you're going to read something that is sensitive, dropping off at ends of lines. There's a lot of warnings here, guys. This is good advice. Things to avoid that are going to grate on your audience. I'm sorry, Amy Beth. I don't know if you meant dropping off at ends of lines was something that is a gimmick that works or something that is kind of a pet peeve. Can you specify? Okay. It bugs you. Got it. Yeah, and I think that that's part of selecting the piece too, is picking in advance if you can something that feels enclosed. I would be interested to ask you guys at the beginning of this, someone said that they're interested in techniques to anchor both in the moment and before the performance. So if any of you guys have techniques that work really well, I'm going to put this question in the chat too. And then we have another question on saying thank you at the end of a piece. Dropping off. Oh, I see, Amy Beth. You don't mean breaking off in the middle of a line. You mean like lowering your voice very rapidly at the end of a line so that people can't hear you. Got it. As something that's frustrating. As far as techniques for anchoring, I believe the question meant how to not be so nervous, like anchoring within yourself in order to not be so nervous before doing the reading or while doing the reading itself. Sorry, I'm just scrolling over here. Someone's asking for opinions on saying thank you to signify the end of a piece, whether it's kind of lazy or annoying or whether it's absolutely okay. One person has said that they don't mind at all, but if that's something that you have an opinion on, feel free to find that comment on the chat and reply. It seems like in general, the consensus is that it doesn't bother folks, which I would agree with. I don't think it really matters. I'm not sure I understand this question. I write about personal experiences. Any suggestions how to convey? Sometimes I get a bit nervous. Do you mean any suggestions how to convey to the audience that you get nervous reading about your personal experiences? Or do you mean something else? Oh, does it matter? Does it matter how you read based on the topics? I think that, I think that as is evidenced by the pieces that we just sort of watched, one of which was a humorous personal essay, and then we had two very, very different kinds of novels. I think that the techniques of presentation hold more or less true no matter what type of piece that you're reading. And in general, to avoid nervousness, people are talking about avoiding too much caffeine, avoiding alcohol, practice and practice and practice. Jumping up and down, maybe. Shakes. And I agree with Amy Beth. I think if you're nervous, it is okay to say so. I think it's okay to share with the audience, which is, of course, what you're already doing by reading something out loud to them. And I think also that there's often a way to make it like humorous and relatable. Like you can be like, I'm really nervous, it like people kind of dig that. They feel like they're being taken into your confidence. I saw Julian just pop back onto the screen. Oh, he's waving at me. He's like, no, carry on. So I'm going to give a minute for one more set of Q&A here, if anybody has anything additional. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to the last couple slides, which are just my conclusion. If you would like to get in touch, if you would like to stay in touch with me, this has my email address, mary@mtgberman.com, also my website, also my newsletter, which is monthly and is a great way to keep up with updates, including about this book that you see up here that is coming out in like 3.5 months. And in the interest of taking the audience into your confidence, I am losing my mind. So keep a lookout for that. It is coming May 19th from Little Brown. You can pre-order it now from Head House, and I will also be at Head House on Thursday, May 21st, if you want to jot that on a little Post-it note and come out and see me read out loud using the techniques that we have talked about here today. I'm taking a look in the chat. We have some gratitude for all of the thoughts on how to anchor. Thank you guys also for all of your thoughts, all of your questions, for practicing here with me today, for sharing your experience. This has been great. And that's it.
So thank you so much, Mary, and thank you to everyone for being here today and for your willingness to practice and be vulnerable and your good questions. I'm going to share some links in the chat. First link is a survey. You can let Mary know what a great job she did. There's also a link to if you want to create your own session like this, if you've got a skill to share, or even just writing prompts that have a connected theme or some idea. Thursdays on the Stoop is really flexible. It's like a little sandbox where you can play and experiment, and we'll pay you to do it. So if you want to pitch, you can do that link. There's a link for upcoming classes, which are currently open for enrollment. Upcoming events. Next week, we've got another Thursdays on the Stoop session. It will be about ekphrastic poetry, which is poetry inspired by art, basically, or in conversation with art, by one of our spring teachers, Winshen Liu. So that's going to be a good session. We also do creative co-working sessions pretty much every Wednesday from 3:30 to 5:30, which is exactly what it sounds like, just a time to get work done with peers. If you want to support Blue Stoop and help us continue to deliver free programs like this one, you can pitch in at bluestoop.org/donate. And with that, I will say thank you again. We'll put this video up on YouTube and share it again with you by email. Thank you for tuning in. I hope the rest of your day goes well. Thank you to Mary. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Bye.